Despite everything that's happened this year, we can at least be grateful for all the great music that has come out. 2020 has definitely given us no shortage of really solid releases, and I'm here to share my top 15 favorite albums of the year. This year especially, I had difficulty ordering this list, particularly for the albums in the middle, so don't take the specific rating for each album too seriously. In addition, if you want to know any runner-ups or releases from previous years that I happened to find in this one, check out the playlist in the description. With that, let's get to it. Igor is odd. Hell, the song that's playing now, Downgrade Desert, is probably the most normal song on this album. This album contains elements from polka, waltz, chiptune, there's even some ham boning thrown in for good measure. My personal favorites are Kung Fu Chevre, where you've got someone going ham on an accordion, and Himalaya Massive Ritual, which uses traditional instruments to create a very interesting track. I could see some people being put off by the strangeness of it all, and some tracks don't particularly work for me either, but the whole project is so bizarre that I have to give it a lot of credit.
I think it's good to hurt sometimes. It makes me feel, it keeps me alive. You'll never understand, no matter what I try. You think the truth says still, but believe in the lie.
I've noticed there's been a bit of a trend of incorporating electronic and synth elements into metal in the last few years. Northlane, for example, used this very effectively in last year's Alien, but Kingdom of Giants put their own spin on things with Passenger. The overall tone of the whole album leads to a listening experience that stands out and is memorable. One potential worry is that you could see an album having tracks that feel too similar, but I didn't feel this way for this one. To me, the standouts are Blue Dream, an excellent flowing track featuring Michael Barr, Burner, which just hits hard as hell, and The Ride, which includes a Courtney LaPlante feature, which is always a good thing. Overall, Passenger is a really solid demonstration of a sort of techno-metalcore mix, which I predict will become even more popular in the near future.
Here's my crutch, I'm a need of her system. I'm marginally obsessed with the way I present myself. I overreact cause that's how I roll. I've been told I am hysterical. I'm Armageddon, so hold your resentment while I bust this out. See requesting my submission and we all know why this one is. I'm proud to have been given the chance to entertain you. Let's explain to the pain of my confidence.
I've seen a whole lot of people saying that Tala is bringing nu metal back, and while if you're saying that, I have several other bands that I would like to point you to, I can't deny Tala's unique spin on things, as they have this great blend of familiar yet fresh sound. You can clearly hear the Korn and Slipknot, but it's been incorporated into several modern elements, all coming together into an album where each track sounds unique. I will admit there are some tracks I can't get into that much myself, but then again, I listen to Overconfidence or Red Light or No One Should Read This, and I get sucked right back in. And I'm definitely very interested to see what these guys do next. There's a lot here to like, and there's potential for so much more in the future.
Watch the bodies drop. Off with the head.
Speaking of new metal influences, Alpha Wolf's Fault EP from last year hit me really hard, and A Quiet Place to Die clearly is meant to expand on this sound. While I don't think Fault's best tracks are superseded by anything here, A Quiet Place to Die does shine in the variety of its tracks. Don't Ask in particular is a great closing track that shows how this sound is not as limited as you might think, but of course you've got incredibly catchy and hard-hitting tracks like Akudama and Rotten Pieces or Restricted that don't slow down for a second. I think a lot of people like this album even more than I do, so definitely check this out if you're hearing anything that intrigues you. I will fully admit that I didn't think much of this album coming into it. I heard some DVSR stuff before, and while I didn't think it was bad by any means, it didn't particularly grab me. And yet, by the first track, I was already hooked. West Technique is a really good album that definitely put DVSR back in my mind as a band to follow, and again, this is another release that shows a decent amount of range and a sound that might initially seem limiting. You've got some heavy and powerful hits like Bloodlust and Where's the Proof, both of which have great features by CJ McMahon and Frankie Palmieri, respectively, while also having some melodic tracks like Liberate Me and Black Magic. The only criticism I can give is that I think the ending could have been a bit stronger, but considering I came into this with unremarkable expectations, it definitely surprised me. I discovered Anal Nathrak last year with their A New Kind of Horror album, and good lord, I still don't really know how to describe their sound. How about complete insanity? Yeah, I guess that works. Anal Nathrak is the perfect thing to listen to if you just want to get assaulted by sound and chaotic energy, and sometimes that's all you need. But even with all that insanity, there are some legitimately really good clean vocals that are almost operatic in a way. It's a really unique sound, and Darkenment shows it off very well. Though personally, I do think A New Kind of Horror stands out a bit more with its tracks, and Darkenment is still a crazy ride from beginning to end, and it's definitely one to check out. Sometimes random clicks lead to something unique and interesting. It's odd because, on the face of things, there isn't any one thing that Nomadic does that feels super original, but the specific blend of everything stands out in a way that I can't quite explain. In fact, the only track that doesn't really do it for me is the first and title track, Euphoria, but the rest of the album is full of creative and interesting moments, from tracks like I Could Get Lost in You Forever If You Let Me, and You're Making a Joke with Your Friends and Suddenly You Realize You're Going to Die. Yes, that's the real song title. To the untitled track and Blue Jay coming together to deliver a really solid conclusion. Nomadic definitely deserves more attention, and they're ones to follow going forward. Ever since I found Numenorian's Adore album from last year, which is now in my top 10 favorite albums of all time, I've been looking for other bands with similar sounds. None of them have been quite right, but Run has been the closest. With interesting song structures, a great drive in their tracks, and an album that, while short, flows together extremely well, Run has put themselves out there with a very prominent release that definitely deserves more attention. The track For You is a really great album opener that sets the tone perfectly, and then you have Within, which is a very odd track structurally, yet it doesn't feel out of place. I will always appreciate more experimentation in metal, and Run has shown they are absolutely ready to head down that road, and I'm all for it. This is another release that I find really hard to put in a specific category, where, again, there isn't any one thing that I can point to as being new or revolutionary, but the overall tone and production created stands out on its own. The instrumentation combines higher atmospheric sounds with solid heavy riffs, and the duo vocalists work off this expertly. Tracks like The Door in the Wall and Wu Wei show this off extremely well, and the last three tracks, Ascent, Follow the Fire, and Welcome Back, provide a really great album finisher. After finding Curses this year, I went back and listened to their first album, and the improvement is very impressive. Chapter 1 Introspect wasn't bad, but this new release is leagues better, and I can't wait to see them get even better going forward. The most prominent feature of Savior is the duality between the ethereal female vocals and the harsh male screams. This has been done before, like with The Artificials, but Savior stands out with their overall flow, atmosphere, and tone. Savior isn't very aggressive, but they take full advantage of this with their tracks and still manage to have a good amount of variety, with each track sounding at least a little different. The tracks Calendars and Arose come right after each other, and they have completely different feels to them, despite still having the same signature Savior sound. I think the ultimate reason I put Savior this high on my list is that it just has such a good vibe throughout the album that other really great releases just don't quite have. Give them some love, they definitely deserve it. Did you think this wouldn't be on here? Dance Gavin Dance, especially since Tillian joined, has had such a consistent level of quality in everything they've put out that it was inevitable that their newest release would be on this list. The instrumentation is as funky and unique as ever, Tillian's vocals are superb, and John just continues to be John. While Mothership is still my favorite of their albums, Afterburner is definitely up there in the ranks of the DGD discography. Lyrics Lie has an extremely catchy flow, Nothing Shameful has an excellent Andrew Wells feature, and Into the Sunset is a very cool and interesting way to close things out. It's probably no surprise that Dance Gavin Dance put out another really great album, but I gotta praise it anyway. Kardashev's The Almanac album is one of my favorite albums of all time, so I was definitely excited for new stuff. The Bearing of Shadows takes things in a bit of a different direction. It's almost jazzy? I don't really have the right words to describe this, but it's absolutely a unique and creative release with both ethereal and powerful instrumentation. I also have to especially praise Mark's vocals as they cover the gamut of, well, pretty much everything. The track Snow Sleep shows this off extremely well with the haunting last third of the track. While the Almanac hit my specific synapses a little bit more, I can't say that The Bearing of Shadows is anything less than really, really good. It's an album that I would be curious to know what non-metal fans would think. I absolutely need more Kardashev in my life, and considering the quality of their releases, despite how different they are, I know I can count on them to deliver. What do you get when you take Tom Barber from Chelsea Grin and Lorna Shore and stick him with Josh Miller from Amir? You get pure fucking madness. Darko is one of the most ruthless and filthiest groups I've ever heard. Hell, this release is basically just 3 full tracks, an intro, and some interludes, and yet I have it at number 3. It's that ridiculously good. The instrumentals are so stupid heavy and Tom's vocals fit in perfectly. And yet they've released 3 other tracks not even on this album that are just as good. Darko is already one of the best and most insane groups out there, and they've only just started. I feel like it's basically a guarantee that Darko is going to show up in any future list I do, and if they release a full length, it absolutely could be a contender for the top of the entire year. Like DVSR, this is another band that, even though I found them last year with Claustrophobic and liked it a lot, I sort of never really considered them to be top tier. I don't even really know why either, I just didn't pay much attention to them. So, when they released the first part of their Lovelorn album back in April, I was blown away by how much I liked it with tracks like Only to Fall, which is ruthless as hell, and Sepulture, which is a 7-minute epic. Even then, I had this release at number 2, and when the full thing was finally released in December, that cemented its placement. Before I Turn has truly outdone themselves with dangerously powerful and creative albums straddling the boundary of metalcore and deathcore. I almost feel that I have to apologize for not thinking that highly of these guys. Lovelorn is an hour-long epic that deserves tons of praise, and while I can't say anything bad about it, it still didn't even come close to number 1. If you'd asked me a few years ago what my favorite album was, I would have struggled to give you a singular answer. But in 2017, I found a little band from Liverpool called Loathe, and their The Cold Sun album immediately seemed to answer that question. It was basically the perfect mix of heaviness and beauty I'd ever heard. But this year, Loathe outdid themselves. I Let It In, and It Took Everything is so good, it's unfair. How can anyone compete with this? It's unbelievably unique, varied, powerful, melodic, catchy, and honestly, just flawless. Not only is this my favorite album of 2020, this is my favorite album of all time. And honestly, if I never heard anything this good ever again, I think I could live with that. Loathe is one. And that does it for my top 20 favorite music albums for the year. Definitely looking forward to a bunch of new stuff coming in 2021. And as for our other movies, well, in January, we got a bunch of real shitty movies to watch, so you can come and enjoy our suffering next month.